I suppose the last couple of years, I've settled down. Fancy. The last couple of years, well, man's 100 years old, isn't it? Well, I'm Uncle Wes Marne. My name is Wesley Edward Marne, and my Aboriginal name is Muggerin, and I'm a Bigambul man. I come from southern Queensland. I was born there in 1922, or I believe I was born there in 1922. I was never registered. And well, we're here today and going to talk a little bit about myself. And but I don't think we have enough time, because when I start, I can't stop. I was born in southern Queensland, and we moved up to Stanthorpe, the other side of Stanthorpe, in the mountains up that way, because my skin was fair, and it was the time of the silent generation. Fair skinned children were taken. I think there was about 50 of us. We all lived together. When we moved away, there's my grandfather, my grandma, my uncles and aunts, and what we call our skin group, and then totem groups, of course. And we went back into the mountains, and that's where I spent the first 10 years. And what memories I have of those years are precious to me, very precious. Many things I can't remember, but many things that I do remember. I remember, I think, the most important thing, and that's a blessing. My grandfather was a storyteller. My dad was a storyteller too, but he wasn't the storyteller that my grandfather was. He was the greatest storyteller that I know of. And even though in those days, when Aboriginal children were not allowed to be told stories, and a lot of stories were lost, Grandfather said, I'm a storyteller, and that's my dreaming. I have to keep it up. And he kept going right up to the time that he died. And we learned this other night when we sat around the fires, and we learnt the stories. He had his own little log that was embedded in the ground, and nobody was allowed to sit on it or touch it. That was his. And he would sit on it, and then the cooey would go out, and all the children would turn up. We would sit around, and we learnt the Dreamtime stories. The rainbow serpent and the first animals that was ever made, and how the birds got their colours, and the birds got their voices, and stories running out of my ears they used to be. And then he would tell the story. In the morning my mother would tell me the stories you heard last night. Now, she might have heard these stories 100 times, but she wanted us to learn them. At that time, I did not know that I was going to be the next storyteller, and that was something that I learned later on. When I knew my grandfather, his name was Muckawee, and it means white water, and I think that's what it means anyway. And when I knew him, he was an old man. How old? Well, I don't know. I don't think he knew how old he was himself. But I do know this. This is what he told me, that he danced. He was allowed to dance at the last great corroboree. The last time when the border tribe was allowed to come together for the last time. And that was in 1907. So I believe. And he was allowed to dance there. So he would not have been allowed to dance there unless he was at least, say, 30-odd years of age. And he had the scars. He had 6 scars on his body. I used to sit on his lap run my hands over his scars on his body. I remember it as if it was yesterday. And he had scars on his arm, battle scars. Every time you go to battle, win the war, go to have a fight, scar your arm. That's like a record. And but he was a master storyteller. And the things that he taught me about the bush, things that I know today, survive in the bush. There's so much out there that can be used, not only for to stop us from starving, but what we use for medicine and this. And I used to I used to like watching them with the smoking ceremonies, and I was always getting into trouble because that's not for children. Certain stories not for children. I think there was about over 20 odd different times that they would light the fires for the smoke. I used to think they just like lighting fires, that they were warm, they were cold, didn't they? But anyway, I learned that there was a reason for everything. And even when I got older, I thought, if I was to just stand around and tell 25 different times of why they had smoked, I'd be there all day. So I decided I would work out the most precious of them all, which were newborn babies were always put through the smoke, they're baptised through the smoke, marriages and death when we lost people. I think they were the most precious of all the things that I had. I still use the same things today. All right. We'll try that for luck. Just poke it out there, buddy, please. And anybody who wants to can walk through the smoke. It's not necessary. Anybody been flying up lately? Go through there. I stole some apples when I was small, and they took me out into the bush. The elders took me out into the bush, and they put me through the smoke. And they held me on this big flag rock. Flag rock, that's a big flat rock that comes out of the ground, and they had the smoke, and they held me in the smoke till I vomited. I vomited. And you want to know? It's all those years later, I've never stolen. I've seen my grandfather, and he was an old man, as I said before. I seen him put a spear into a wallaby at about I reckon about 40 metres away. And the spear was hanging out the other side of a wallaby. And he was a master at it. And especially one day, I was with him in the bush here. I seemed to be always with him. And anyway, we were walking, and he grabbed me, pushed me back into the bush, and the wallaby was fast. And he put a spear into him. The wallaby was on the move, but he got him. And I wanted to touch him. I wanted that much. I wanted to touch this here animal. And he grabbed hold of me. He said, "Get away." He said, and when I looked at him, he was, as he always spoke when he killed something, he said, "Look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I killed you. But I didn't kill you because I didn't like you. I didn't kill you because you was in my way. I killed you because I needed your meat. And you knew I needed your meat, and you came by this morning and you offered yourself to me, so thank you very much." I went home, said, "Mum," I was telling her, she said, "Oh, go and ask your uncles." So I went up, and the uncle said, "Yeah, well, right back in the beginning of the dream time, when men and animals were one. Men could turn into animals, animals could turn into men. And sometimes, when men turned into animals, they liked it that much that they didn't want to change back. And they've gone through all these thousands of years living as an animal. And that wallaby that the old fella killed today could be one of our relations. And that's why he was apologising to him. In our culture, you don't kill for nothing. If you only needed one kangaroo to feed the men, that's only you killed one kangaroo. You didn't kill two, you didn't need two. Anything like that was always, even the women gathering, to gather enough. The vegetables not too bad because they keep. Whatever the women gathered, just enough for today. And everything like this, something is how we survived here for 60,000 years by living this way. And that would take a bit of an effort. Sometimes they would bring animals in after they killed them, and they would drain the blood and give it to the kids to drink. And I had that taste to it in me today. I still drink. I could still drink. And I think it was they make a man of you. And because most of the meat that we ate in those days was always half raw anyway. And I used to love insides. The gut of the animal, they would get them, put them on, and when they finish up, they in a little ball. And I could eat that. Must be a rat bag or something, no. The best meat in the bush, though, is the echidna. He's the best meat in the bush. I'll kill for him. And the Bigambul or the echidna, you can't touch him if he's walking along a track or along a road. That road leading somewhere. He's on a journey. He could be on a journey, special journey, might be carrying special messages. But if he's off the road, just meandering through the bush, I got him for breakfast in the morning, you know. I remember once, when I was young, small, my favourite fruit, I loved fruit. Always bush fruit was beautiful. And I used to love napalm. Napalm it's spelled exactly the same as the oil that they used in Vietnam. And it's like a large grape. It grows on the vine up into the tree and then it hangs down. I used to stuff myself. I could never get enough of them. One day in the bush with old Uncle Wes, I saw the napalm. It must have been late spring. So I raced over and I'm stuffing myself. He grabbed me by the manga, by the ear. He said, "Get away." I said, "It's napalm." He said, "I know what it is." I said, "I want some." He said, "You just had some." I said, "No, well, there's plenty more," he said, "but not for you." If you eat all that, all the animals and the birds, they're not going to get anything. If they don't get any, they're going to die. They can live without us, but we can't live without them. You know what? Must have been about 16 years later. I woke up one morning. God, he's teaching me conservation. That's how stupid I was. It took me all those years to work out that he was teaching me conservation, the art that they had of teaching conservation. And, well, the old man's gone now. I used to race down there first thing in the morning, get out of the gunya and go straight down to his little fire. He had a little fire. I got there this morning and he'd passed on. And I'd never seen anyone. I still remember running back to Mum, and she said, go and tell the men. Go and tell your uncle. So I went and told. And they came down and they said, well, we're going to move. They come down, they had a big talk, and then the women came and said, all right, all you kids, we're heading for the big river. Oh man, pleasures of pleasures. The big river where we could swim, mudslides and play around and flop around. And the women got ready and then they made Johnny cakes and we went to the river, had a ball. When we came back, Muckawee was gone. I don't know where they put him. Maybe under the roots of a tree on the side in the river, on the big creek, the creek where we had our camp, or into a hollow tree maybe, or they might have buried him, I don't know. But when I was a young man, I went back to try and find him, because I think he might have left me a message. I thought if I could come back and find where he was, he would know I was there. Anyway, I never found him. And then we went on and I was lost without him. I was lost. In Aboriginal culture, you can't eat your totem. Your totem is something and you take your mother's totem. So you take your mum's totem, dad's tribe, mum's totem. Mum, they say your mother's meat, see? And even if she comes from another tribe 1,000 miles away, you take her totem. I take my mum's, which is a koala bear. And you can't touch it. If I'm in the bush, and the koala bear's sitting on the track in front of me, I can't walk up and say, go and move him. I have to wait till he moves. Then I can walk past him. And my mother could come from Flinders Island. That's where she came from. How she got up that way, I don't know. We never spoke about it. But anyway, and she's Palawa, Tasmanian Aboriginal. And her dream was to walk on her own land back in Tasmania. Then one day we finally made it. And anyway, I spent a lot of time with the women, and the women, the gatherers, and that to tell the stories. The women were teaching us culture. And my mum had two sisters. And two sisters makes me with three mothers. I have three mothers. I called them Mum, and they called me Son. And we were classed as mother and son. And they were the ones who taught me about Aboriginal culture and kept reminding me of the stories that we had. He is the ultimate hunter. He's a bushman without peer, but nothing is safe when he is hunting with his ancient wimmer and spear. But what of the one who goes with him, the one who walks in his tracks, usually with one child behind her and another one on her back, with a cornman under her arm and a billy bag around her waist? She wanders along gathering food is an everlasting chase. She wanders back and forth, gathering seed for bread, looking and digging for yams to be cooked in the camp ahead. At night she prepares the shelter, and then the evening food. Always busy moving around, there's always something to do. Next time we look at a picture of a warrior of this land, let's look for the one behind him, for the one who's always on hand. For she is the eternal companion, the one we never see, but she's the reason that life goes on, her and the children at her knee. Everybody had a position. You had a weapon maker, you had a shield maker, you had a knife maker, you had a coolerman maker. Everybody had a and we used a barter system. I'll trade you for this, for this. Well, it worked. And you know, the other week, we had a Palestinian come in, just there, what? And I'm sitting there, and I told you that, didn't I? And he said, yeah, you fellas are doing pretty good for yourself now. And I said, are you in the same country as me? And he said, well, yes, look what you've got. I said, you're talking to a black fella. And he just laughed. I said, I'm going to tell you. I said, and he's talking, and I said, wait. I said, we looked after this country for 60,000 years. Took you 200 years to muck it up, but I didn't use the word muck it. I said, I said, 200 years, and then the mess you've made of this country. He said, I'm going to take that back to Canberra with me when I go there. I said, that's good. I said, let's learn a little bit.